Thank you, Carrie-Anne, and welcome everybody. So first, have we any apologies for today?
I haven't received any apologies, Chair.
Okay, well, we know that some members are trying to join us and having technical difficulties, but we're now quorate, so we will proceed. Declarations of interest. I haven't seen anything obvious there. Anybody want to declare an interest on anything on the agenda? No, we're all happy to proceed again. Thank you. So the first substantive item, minutes of our last meeting, and the board held on 13th of February. Would anybody like to propose them as a true record to begin with?
I will, Chair, yes.
Thank you, Graham. Diolch. And are we all in favour of that? And yeah, so take them as a true record. Is there anything there for matters arising thereon? I think there are several things there, but most of them will be on today's agenda anyway. I think yeah, at the end of minute 6, there's a note: the pension fund manager explained due to increasing scale, the work needed to run the service effectively, further resources are required in the process of implementing this. But I think Chris will pick that up later on in the meeting, and I think it's into the operational or legislation updates.
Yes, I've just shared my screen, Chair. I'm not sure if that's helpful to anybody. Otherwise,
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, ideal.
So I'm just catching up. I'm just scrolling through to the minutes. So item 6 we're talking about then, weren't we? Was that right? Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sure I've seen that reference to that in an item further down the agenda.
Yeah, correct.
That was one. There's an action under 7.
Yep, which I picked up as part of the updated paper to do with the operational administration update as well. So we'll come on to that one later as well.
Ideal. And there's talk about being 70% pooled, and we've got a WPP update which will pick that up. And we mentioned the KC's legal opinion, and we've got reference to that in a subsequent item as well, with a link to the Scheme Advisory Board note, which is more readable than the opinion itself.
It is, yeah.
So yeah, lots of stuff we went through last time. Cybersecurity is on again today. So if nobody's got any other matters arising, I can't see many pictures on the screen at the moment. So I'm shout if you have something to raise. But we'll move on to the committee minutes. Yeah, this was the meeting of 26th of March, where I was present on your behalf, and they again discussed a wide variety of matters. Minute 6 there, I think, is the risk register. At our last meeting, we'd made a few recommendations with regard to the risk register, and Chris duly presented those to the committee with an amended wording which they approved going forward. So it's nice to have contributed there. Otherwise, lots on pooling, etc. which we'll pick up later. Natural capital is worth mentioning in passing, the decision there to invest in forestry through Gresham House. I think it's fair to mention that public now, isn't it, Chris?
Yep, that'll be reported in the accounts in due course, yeah, as well. So
so that's a modest but an important change in the investment. It means we're started investing in natural capital, and we've also investing in something which is in Powys County as well.
Which meets with the government's agenda when it comes to this Fit for the Future proposal as well. Like investing locally, you can determine local in many different ways, but it's not very often we get the opportunity to invest in something in Powys. So it's pleasing in lots of ways, natural capital and local as well. So
yeah, and it doesn't involve any pylons or huge structures. It's more natural. So yeah. Quite a lot of stuff there, but I don't think anything else needs picking out, I think. So if everyone's happy with that, we'll move on to the admin update, which is item 6 on the agenda. Do you want to present that, Chris?
Yep, certainly. Thank you, Chair. So this is, board will be familiar with this, the format of this paper. I did take on board your comment that you'd like to see an annual snapshot rather than a quarterly snapshot. Just find it more useful. So I tried to reflect that in item 2.1 here, where I've actually done both. Because it was the end of the financial year, we've got the last quarter in the middle columns. But what I thought would be helpful would be for you to see in the right-hand column the total for the year as well. Because we've been doing quite a bit of work on cash flow modelling and whatnot, I thought it was important for the board to just have some understanding of the ins and outs when it comes to the administration side of things. So you can see from the column on the right that the outgoing in terms of pension benefits is around about £40 million a year, but the income from contributions and transfers and whatnot is around about 36 million. So the difference of around about 4 million in terms of what's coming in and what's going out. But it's important to frame this in the context of this is only looking at part of the overall picture. We've obviously excluded anything investment related in this, but still it just identifies that because of the maturity of the Powys Fund, the contributions coming in alone are not enough to pay for benefits that are going out. Therefore, we need to adjust our investment strategy accordingly to make sure there's enough money coming in to meet the benefits as they're called, which is why committee recently approved a cash flow modelling strategy, just tweak the investment strategy slightly just to keep this in mind that benefits are increasing, liabilities are increasing. Therefore, we just need to keep an eye on it and monitor it as time goes forward. We're still cash flow positive overall, but it's expected within the medium term, I guess, likely within the next 10 years or so, depending on how things go, that we might tip over into being a cash flow negative fund. At that point, that will require a tweak to the investment strategy to make sure that we have enough coming in to pay benefits as they're due, which is why we're doing this work now, to prepare for that. So that's the financial picture. Hopefully that's helpful. Bit of background information for you there. Any questions on that one, Chair or Board, before I move on?
I can't see any hands up, Chris, but from myself, yeah, I'm glad you've confirmed that with the investment income, we're still cash flow positive. And I think your point about keeping an eye on that in the medium term is very astute, because as a consequence of the triennial valuation, we may have a reduction in contribution rates. That's yet to be confirmed, of course, but reduction in contribution rates would make us a negative impact on cash flow costs. But yeah, it's good that the investment income is keeping us positive net at the moment.
Yeah.
On those figures, the March figures, I noticed that the transfers out and transfers in are huge compared to other months. Is that an accounting issue that things get counted at the end of the year, or?
Don't know, to be honest, Chair. I'd have to find out the information about that one and come back to you. Yeah, we have seen periods where things increase, but the fact it's in March, I wonder whether there's been some accounting rectification. I don't know. I'll check that and confirm that for you. Yeah.
I would suspect that's the case.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay.
See, David's got his hand up,
Yeah,
Chair.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, David, welcome to the meeting. I didn't
Oh,
realise
yeah. But
you were in.
apologies, everybody, for my technical incompetence at this end with Zoom. But anyway, quick question on that, Chris. I mean, we're still cash flow positive at the moment, you said. What's this? Do you know, just out of interest, across the other funds in Wales, are we an outlier in terms of where we are, or is this likely to be something facing everybody in terms of the adjustments to their investment strategies in the future?
Thanks, David. No, we're not an outlier. It's a very similar story painted across the LGPS as a whole, actually. Some funds are more mature than ours and are already in a cash flow negative position and have adjusted their strategy accordingly. But within Wales, I'm aware of one fund that has a strategy, like a liability matching strategy in place. I'm not aware that any of the other funds have that in place, but it's fairly common across the piece that we're all getting to that point now. In the near future, strategy is likely to change.
And sorry, just last follow-up question on that. When you say the strategy might change, that would include the contribution levels, wouldn't it? That it would be a mix of where we put the money and also how much money we get from the employers. Is that right, Chris?
Absolutely, yeah. We'd have to consider the whole piece. And as the chair's rightly touched upon, if the valuation comes along and contribution rates reduce, then that obviously has a net more pronounced effect in this table. Which would mean we'd have to adjust a table somewhere else to offset that. Yeah.
Right.
But we look at the whole piece when setting that contribution rate. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
That's thanks, David. Good to see you. And the topic is a very live one. I think it was one of the main talking points at the recent LGC conference in Carden Park, where most of the actuaries present were suggesting reductions in contribution rates generally emanating from the valuation, and the cash flow impact of that on nearly all LGPS funds. Lots of us in the same field, but we'll need careful consideration. And I think there are a few thinking about changing the investment allocation to different asset classes to have more income generating assets. So that would be an interesting conversation with Aon going into the investment strategy post valuation results, I think.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, that any expected contribution rates are off the back of an improved funding level. I think the expectation is, obviously this all needs to play out through the calculations that the actuaries are doing and whatnot, but funding levels have been improving over recent years, and I think the pattern is expected to continue. So improvement in funding level gives the opportunity to review employee contribution rates. That's what this discussion is framed around, improvement in funding levels.
Okay, so the recommendation is that we're asked to note the contents of the report.
Before we do that, Chair, so can I just pull out one more point, if that's okay?
Sure,
It's just in terms of the member statistics, and the reason I raise this here is because there's an item later on which is looking at the performance of the administration performance of the team, and we've seen an uptick in that recently for a couple of reasons, but that's just supporting this image you've got in front of you, which is essentially looking at our member records from the start of the year, 1st of April 2024 through to 31st of March 2025. And it starts off around about 19,000, 18,940, and it finishes on 18,892, so a reduction of 48. And that's just primarily because the team are working through some historical cases where records are being aggregated. So, for example, somebody's got two employments, they leave one of them. The pension regulations allow us to combine those, so they have one continuing employment going forward, and the pension records are combined to reflect that as well. So it's just showing that we're catching up a little bit in respect of backlogs, and we're not unique in seeing this number go down. Actually, I've seen this elsewhere as well, that lots of us in the LGPS are now processing historical cases in respect of McLeod and whatnot in readiness for pensions dashboards. So I just wanted to point that out because quite often over recent years, we've seen membership numbers increase. This is the first time I presented it, and it's actually gone down, but it's because of us tidying up some records with McLeod and pension dashboards in mind.
Quite right, Chris, and I think I'm right in saying the Haywood system, if you go back to the really historic records, they were unable to account for two jobs under one record, and it's a catch up of those records 6 or 8 years ago, previous to that. They're
Absolutely.
now being unified, and that's across the board, I think.
It is, and we might see this continue potentially across the LGPS as well. So we will, and I think it's important as well, because when you're presenting information to scheme members, it's easy to present one set of pension benefits as opposed to 2 or 3. So I think with the dashboard in mind, we're trying to catch up a little bit in terms of our backlog, which you'll see later on. I'll just take you through that later on. But that was it for this report, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, interesting point. I think we're all happy to note the contents. So no dissenting voices. We'll move on to the next item, which is the legislation and guidance update. I noticed on this one, I'm not sure if it's just my tech, and sympathy, David. I was chairing. I told Carrie Ann I joined early this morning because I tried to join the North Wales Fire Authority's pension board last week, and as chair I couldn't get in, which was a very invidious position. So I was keen to get on Zoom early this morning. It works good, but the links on this are not working for me, Chris. So when you've got paragraph 1 bulletins.
Yeah, I noticed that actually.
Oh, it's not just me.
No, it's so whether something's happened in the formatting or making it into PDF, I'm not sure. So I'll pick that up with Democratic Services later on, and whether we can rectify that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, do you want to present the report? There's lots of stuff in here, so I don't know if we want to take it in chunks and ask questions as we go on the various sections.
Happy to do whatever, Chair. If there's questions as I'm going, please feel free to shout out. Much like you, I'm not as easy to see hands if I'm talking and whatnot. So I'll just pull out some of the pertinent points, if that's okay.
Sure.
So if we start with 2.2, this is just making board aware that the annual governance conference is taking place in January in Cardiff. I think the option is in person or a hybrid. But obviously with the board's interest in governance and scrutiny and whatnot, this is a useful conference that is available should board members wish to attend and get up to speed on all things governance within the LGPS. Taking on board comments around McLeod, I just thought I'd update board with a bit more detail than just saying we're continuing to work through the cases and whatnot. There's just some numbers in here. First couple of paragraphs are background, and just to remind that the McLeod remedy is essentially a check that the team have to carry out to determine whether members in a certain group are better off under the old final salary arrangements or when they came across the care arrangements. My team work through a check and they pay the better of the 2 scenarios, essentially. The problem is that we have to revisit lots of historic cases that have already been paid out on the career average basis. We now have to unpick those cases, do the check, and then pay the better of the 2 scenarios. Again, important to point out that it's no detriment to the scheme members. They're already in a position where they're getting the benefits they're entitled to. They would only increase if the McLeod remedy kicks in and advises that they were better under the old final salary arrangement. So today we've completed 100% completed 5 employers within the fund, and there's probably a similar number that have had the work done, but they just need signing off. So next time I present to board, I'm expecting to see that number increase significantly. So that's historic work in respect of around about 10 employers has been completed, which is half the employers in the fund. And all the new cases since the legislation came into effect from October 2023 are actually checked. So at the point of paying benefits, whether it be retirement, a transfer, or whatever it might be, the team since October 2023 have been implementing the McLeod remedy. So all the live cases have been done. It's the historic cases that we're working through. So just thought I'd update board, say we're making some progress and we're expecting to see that ramp up in the not too distant future. Happy to take any questions at that point, Chair, because I know that was something that you wanted an update on.
Yes, we've got a statutory deadline, I think, is October to complete this work on the McLeod remedy, and I think while happy to receive this report today, I think by the time we meet in July, I think we need to have ascertained the sort of timeline on completion. And I know the employers remaining to be completed include Powys, which is 90% of the scheme. So we as a board, we need to be assured whether the scheme administrator will be able to complete by the statutory deadline of October. So
yeah, that's fine.
I'll have a specific item on that to the next meeting.
Yeah, no problem. Again, just to point out, we're not unique in this situation. There is a lot of funds out there working their way through the backlog in respect of McLeod cases, and it tends to be, from what I've seen in the conversation I've had, it's the ones with the smallest administration resource that are struggling the most. Obviously, us being the smallest fund in Wales, we've increased the administration resource and the resource which will come on later on to try and help with this. But yeah, David.
I think you might just have answered the question I was going to ask, Chris. I'm just checking, have you got enough resources? Are you getting the support you need to have the resources you require? Because obviously this has come around quite quickly now, hasn't it? But I think I'm guessing you're going to say yes.
I think we're in the right place now, and off the back of the review that we carried out in the summer last year, it was identified that the third party thought that we actually were in a good place when it came to administration resource now. The problem is, as you'll know, the LGPS is very, very complicated, and it's very difficult to get people in the door and hit the ground running when it comes to these sorts of things. So it's taken some time to get the team up to where we need to be. But I think, as you'll see in the item later on, when it comes to the performance of the team, I think we're there now. So I'm expecting and hoping that we'll see some improvements and some progress, real progress in respect to the backlogs shortly.
Thanks, Chris. And yeah, we'll come back to that. Do you want to continue?
Yep, I'll continue. Yeah. Just section 3 is just making board aware of some updates on the Scheme Advisory Board. The chair of the Scheme Advisory Board, Councillor Roger Phillips, has met with the chairs of the pension committees in England and Wales, and our chair, Councillor Peter Lewis, attended that meeting as well. That took place a week or two ago, I think. So it's good that we have actually got some dialogue with the bodies representing us to the government as well, with these meetings taking place.
I had a chat with Roger at a recent conference, and he does have a lot in common with us as a councillor for a rural area not too far away, and he will be standing down later this year, I think, but from the Scheme Advisory Board. But yeah, I think he's been a good friend to us in that position.
Yeah, no, that's true. There's a 3.2 is just acknowledging that the government has responded in respect of business cases that the pool's put forward to it in respect of the LGPS Fit for the Future consultation. So there'll be a meeting due to take place between the Scheme Advisory Board and how it might be able to support funds that have had various bits of news and whatnot with regards to their business plan. So there's a lot happening when it comes to pooling. Again, we'll touch on that in a later item on the agenda. 3.3 is probably an important one that I just wanted to take board through. The chair's already alluded to the fact we discussed this at the last meeting when the full guidance document on fiduciary responsibility had been made available. The Scheme Advisory Board have very helpfully since then summarised that legal advice. And I think the key takeaways, in fact, we had a session with the committee on this on Monday this week, but I think the key takeaways are that non-financial considerations could be taken into account when it comes to making decisions in respect to investments, where there's no risk of a serious detriment to financial returns on that decision, and where there's a broad support from the membership in respect of that decision as well. So committees can consider things that are maybe more not investment or financial related, but they have to pass those two tests really, i.e. there's no significant risk and that there's support from the membership about that. So we had a detailed discussion with committee on that on Monday, on what that means. I don't know whether there's anything you wanted to add to that, Chair, because I'm aware that you were at that session as well.
I was, yeah, and while the legal advice has been explained in a summary fashion, it still remains to be tested, and I think it's our perceptions of what that says still to a degree. I mean, the identifying what's in the scheme members' interests is still a difficult one, and I think we explored that with Aon, and actually going out for scheme members' opinions on things is fraught with difficulty, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, still a useful step forward, but not entirely clear.
Agreed. Yeah. Agreed. Okay, thank you. Moving on quickly then. Pensions dashboards, an update for board in respect of progress. In summary, I've got no concerns when it comes to pensions dashboard at this stage. We've made some good strides. The regulators produced some short films for scheme members to be able to have a look at what it means for them, or pension savers, I should say, because it's not just limited to our scheme. But they have produced some bullet points or some actions that schemes should consider when it comes to being prepared for pension dashboard ecosystem. And we've done it. We've done all these 5 steps. We're in a good place. We've met with the software provider many times. We've set up the matching criteria. We've registered with the TPR's exchange portal. We're in the process of registering with the Money Advice Pension Service. So from a board perspective, we're in a good place when it comes to progress. The real test will be when it goes live in October. It's still an unknown as to what will happen when pension savers start using the dashboard, what it will mean for the team. Are we going to get lots of inquiries because of members not understanding it? This is the first time this has been done, so it's a bit of an unknown. But in terms of getting ready for it, preparation for it, I'm confident and comfortable that we're in a good place. We carried out some data testing with the software providers as well ahead of the launch, and the errors in respect of our data were single digits, so we had less than 10 data errors when it came to testing it. So in terms of our data, it's in a very good place when it comes to the matching criteria as well. So very pleased with progress, and I remain to be optimistic that we'll be able to hit the October deadline.
Well done, on track with that. Yep.
Yeah. Other matters, so the resourcing in the pensions team, I thought it was important just to make board aware. You'll be aware that committee approved some additional resource towards the end of 2024. It's taken some time, but we have actually got an advert out now for the first of those new posts. So there's an advert out for a governance and communications officer, which I think is crucial. Obviously, governance around the LGPS is really ramped up over recent years. It'll give me support when it comes to the governance side of things, but also communications will really help when it comes to delivering the message to scheme members, employers, and whatnot. So that advert is closing on Sunday. I haven't yet checked to see whether we've had any applications or whatnot, but I'm hopeful that we'll get some applicants for it. And that's the first step in getting the additional resource in, as discussed recently. In respect to the additional or the other posts, there's 2 that are almost ready to go as well. I just need to sign off on a couple of points, but I'm expecting within the next month or so that all the adverts for the new posts will be out, and in fact one of them will have closed as well. So it's taken some time to get here, but we are now in a position that the adverts are due to go if they're not already gone out. So in the not too distant future, hopefully we'll have the additional support that we need.
Really pleased to see tangible evidence of some support for you, Chris, and much needed, I think, to in the current context of so much going on. Yeah, hopefully we can move on the other posts as well very soon.
Yeah, okay, thank you. A quick update as well on 5.2 on the vacancies on the pensions board. Obviously, the board will be aware that we've got a vacancy for a scheme member representative and employer representative. So I just wanted to update board on what's happened since we last met. So I've actively gone out to employers to try and seek a volunteer for the employer vacancy, but unfortunately I've not been successful at that in securing a new representative for the vacant seat. So I've got a plan B. I'm going to go back out very, very shortly to see if I can try and fill that vacancy. So I'll continue to work on that. With regards to the scheme member representative, I've approached the county council to look at the opportunity of trying to recruit a trade union representative into that vacancy. Previously, we had representation from Unison and from GMB. So I've gone back to, obviously having Ian on the board as a Unison representative, I've gone back to the council to see if the other trade unions within the council are able to nominate somebody to fill that vacancy as well. I'm awaiting a response on that. That's only happened in the past week or 10 days. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to try and fill that vacancy at least, and then go out for plan B in respect of the employer vacancy as well. So I guess the summary is I've done some work on it since we last spoke, and it's ongoing.
Yeah, that is one I chased Chris up on when I realised where we were, and hopefully we'll see some traction on that by the next meeting.
Yeah, I'll keep you updated.
I can't see any hands, so we have discussed, as you've been through, Chris, the recommendation is to note the contents of the report. So everybody happy with that?
Yep.
Can't see any hands, but take silence as
Yeah, happy, Chair. Yeah.
Thanks, David. Okay, the next one is me, and this is the report on your behalf as Pension Board for the financial year, which is just finished. This document will form part of the fund's annual report for the year. And after a chat with Chris, it's when he chased me up on when we had our chats, and I put this together. And I've had some draft comments from one or two places, as it was my first one. I've sounded out a few people to see, well, do you think this holds water? I haven't changed it massively from what Gerard put together in the past, but I have done it in sort of more subheadings there, and the start of the report is pretty similar to what you've had in past years. And I think it gets in the main course when it gets to the work of the board, and the scope is very much as it was, and the regular items. I've highlighted some key issues that's on page 30 of the pack, which I've just given them a bit more prominence there. Things like risk management, which we look at regularly, the code of practice, McLeod, which we discussed again today, data and cyber security, regulatory deadlines, the valuation, which is for the year just finished, and investment and pooling, which is very much a happening thing at the moment. So I've given those issues prominence as those are the things we've given quite a bit of time to going through the year, and I think those will tick the box of what's required to be having looked at. And then I've put in the future work plan, paragraph 29, the bottom of page 31. I've identified some of the stuff going forward there, good governance, the structures for the staffing, the dashboard, McLeod, WPP and pooling legislation, and the valuation as some things which are ongoing and will require attention in the year going forward. I put quite a bit of chunk on training there, which it's a statutory requirement that we do keep on top of things and trained, and some thanks. And the first thanks is to yourselves all on this call for the welcome I had as a new board chair, and the second one's to thank Gerard for an orderly handover, and he was very good in talking me through everything before I took over. A few more thanks there. So that's the report. It's a draft for you to tear apart or approve as you see fit, but I've numbered the paragraphs there for ease of reference in this conversation, and the format can be amended slightly to fit in the style of the fund's annual reports as you see fit, Chris, really. But yeah, I put the numbers on just for ease of reference if anyone wants to ask anything. Any questions?
No, nothing from me, thank you.
Yeah,
It's slightly shorter than Gerard's.
yeah, I think it is, Chair. It's slightly shorter, but can I just ask a question, David? I just wondered whether or not you needed to just make sure that the committee understands the role of the board. Have we adequately covered that in the report? Have you adequately covered that in the report? Do you think?
Not sure. I've got the
I did see the role of the
where I-
board somewhere, scope of the board's
Yeah,
work.
it
but,
was at the front, and I just wondered, was that
there's interaction with the committee in 13 and 14.
yeah. So there's the paragraph 7. There's the functions.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Perhaps paragraph 8 is enough. So maybe that covers it, David. So yeah. Maybe it's if you're happy with that. Yeah.
I think you know, whether the committee understands that's another matter, but I'm sure they do, and I've been welcome to the committee meetings, and they do listen to when I make recommendations. So I think they've got respect for the board.
Oh yeah. Okay. Good. That's
Absolutely,
great.
yeah.
Thanks, David.
Okay, so there isn't a covering report on this, but basically it's for your approval for it to go forward as part of the annual reports, and unless there's any suggested improvements.
It looks pretty comprehensive to me, David.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, David. We'll leave that with Chris to include in the larger document then. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you. So in terms of what happened next, and I'll drop this draft version into the draft version of the overall report. So there will still be an opportunity to tinker with it. The publication date of the annual report is by the 1st of December. Obviously, work has commenced now to try and produce that quite comprehensive document, as you've seen previously. So, yep, I'll take this forward as it is, and providing there's no other comments or anything, this will be the version. Whether I adjust the formatting slightly, but that this will be the version that ends up in the first draft of that document.
Yeah, there's a table I got from Gary Ann in there, which you may be able to, or someone in Powys might be able to improve the formatting of the ticks are a bit big. That's what I could get on my tech.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you all. And we're now into the risk register, which in this meeting we're looking at the investment pillar. And I think we've already mentioned that when we were talking about cash flow, that as a consequence of the valuation, we'd probably be looking again at the investment strategy statement during this year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that might be another thing for consideration, but that's mainly the in the purview of the committee rather than the board. So I didn't include that so prominently in the annual report from us. But that first one talks about the 22 valuation, and the prudence increased by reduction in the recovery period, increase in the probability. So I think that's held us in good stead in the past, and Chris and I have had discussions on that, and we'll be keeping an eye on that going forward when the committee discuss the ISS. So that's while we're looking at it today, that will change a bit going forward during the year. Do you want to take us through this, Chris, or are we just going to shall I ask for comments on each of the individual?
That would be my intention, Chair. I mean, I can, if there's any explanation needed, and I can do that for the board. I guess the thing to consider as well, are we happy with the scoring, the mitigations and the scoring is something to consider, because I know we've presented revised scoring to committee previously as well.
We did, and they accepted our
They did, yeah.
I think the first one is fine as it stands now, but just note that it'll require looking at again, and when decisions are made in the current year.
Yeah.
And
I think the scoring is probably fair as well. My personal opinion is that the scoring is probably fairly well represented there.
I think so, yeah. And the second one does say strategy will be reviewed on the outcome of the China evaluation on the second risk in
Yes.
So I'm quite happy with what's appearing in here, really. Unless anyone shouts, I'm going through the ones on the first page. Happy with that. Second page is 4 to 7. I think it's all, as it should be. The pooling one on risk 8 on, not sure what the page is.
37 of the pack, I think, looking at it on the left. But yes, this is top one here, isn't it? The one there, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. And I was looking there, it refers in the left-hand column to changes to legislation related to pooling of assets. Of course, that's up in the air in terms of the legislation. What we've had so far is the consultation, but it's legislation push, really, isn't it? We've been advised of legislation to come and had to run with it. And I see that's been reviewed last week, really.
Yeah.
Were there any changes in those risk measures, Chris? Or this is one, it could be very volatile over the last 6 months, couldn't it? You could have bounced up the risk metric and then when we had the good news more recently, bounced down again. But has that stayed more or less the same, I suppose, through it, pending resolution of those things?
Yeah, you're right. The benefit we've got of carrying out this exercise is we do it annually, don't we? So a lot of these were picked up last year, and I think some wording was revised. I think this, in fact, the one the sentence to do with including changes of legislation was off the back of what we knew was coming. So that was like a catch-all phrasing, really, to say legislation might change, we have to manage it. But no, there's been nothing changed over the short term in respect to this one. It has stayed as it is. But I guess we could consider whether the scores are appropriate. 9's obviously pretty significant.
But 9 is pre mitigation, isn't it?
Yes.
And I suppose the mitigation has been that shed load of work which officers, including yourself, have done over the last 6 months to try and get WPP in a good position. I suppose that 6 perhaps could be reduced now with the recent letter from the ministers.
Yeah, perhaps. But again, we're still reliant, as I touched on your earlier point, we're still reliant on the legislation actually being formally laid and approved, aren't we? So whether we it's an interesting one, isn't it? Well,
I haven't got strong feelings on
no,
it, but
I mean, it's something we could propose and raise with committee for them to consider, but it kind of feels right. But I'm happy to revise.
It's quite acceptable to me as it is, but I think if we were doing this 6 weeks ago,
yeah,
it would have been different to what it is today. So I think there's been some movements, volatile movements up and down, and perhaps we're back where we were a year ago, feeling sort of reasonably confident we can get through this.
Yeah, it's an interesting point there. Maybe it's something that when we if this happens again, hopefully it won't now for some time, but if this sort of thing happens again, whether we jump straight to this risk and actually identify that maybe we need to review it sooner than the review period. Essentially, these are logged in the system, and we set a review period. And I'm not sure what it is for this one, but it might be 3 months or 6 months or something like that. But whether we actually just jump in and don't wait for that review period to happen.
Yeah.
So where we identify risk, yeah.
We discussed the risk as a pension fund, as a committee, as a board, didn't we? But we didn't go back to this risk measure particularly. Perhaps on reflection, it might have been something we could have done, but
perhaps, yeah,
we were dealing with it rather than reporting it, I think.
Yes, I think that's fair.
Okay. I think with comments on those two, that's all I had on this pillar of the risk register. Really, the first couple and the investment strategy and that one. Just to comment that things are less risky now than they were 6 weeks ago. Really.
Yeah.
Okay. So
David. Yep.
David.
Yeah. Just a quick comment. I'm just thinking back to that fiduciary duty in the LGPS. And Chris, do you think that requirement around non-financial considerations is going to affect this pillar at all? And does it actually require a policy to be put in place or inclusion in the investment strategy, do you think? I know there's a lot up in the air, and I think, David, you said, you know, it was a useful step forward, but it's not entirely clear when we spoke about it. But I wondered if it will somehow feature in this as a risk to be managed.
I think it's a fair comment. I think the committee are looking at the responsible investment policy, and the reason I frame that is because some of the challenge, I guess, is around the responsible investment and people's opinions on various investments and whatnot. That's probably where we're getting challenged on these sorts of things. So whether it could be included somewhere within the responsible investment policy, potentially. There was a discussion around communications with members and how we do that. And as the chair's rightly pointed out, that can be fraught with difficulties if you don't get it right and whatnot, and how we best tackle that.
Yeah.
We've got this communications post out for advert at the minute, where that's something we can consider as a piece of work for them on how we tackle that and how we capture it. But yeah, I think it's a fair point. Do I think it's going to be a risk? It's not been tested yet. No, I guess would be the comment.
Okay.
But whether we acknowledge that somewhere, can you leave that one with me? I'll give that some thought then, I think, David, if that's okay.
Yeah, it was just, and there has been stuff in the media about this with some pension funds where they've been asked questions about investments in various areas.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, when Russia invaded Ukraine, there was all the quick check, wasn't there, on any investments in areas that could be
correct, yeah,
could be contrary to what would be acceptable. But I'm just thinking around this fiduciary duty, it's a balancing act, isn't it? You know, and then I don't want to open up too big a discussion, but then there's also, you know, how does the pooling arrangements cover off the fiduciary duty as well? Because there's obviously pressure to invest in infrastructure projects, isn't there, through pooling?
Yeah.
So that's probably more a comment than a, you know, but just that issue's got to be balanced off in the risk register somewhere, hasn't it? Going forward, I would have thought.
I think that's fair comments, to be honest.
Okay, just leave it at that.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to say. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, perhaps we should identify that as one for consideration in the future. Obviously, fiduciary duty is for consideration on every investment decision, really, on its merits. But I think the KC's opinion didn't make the risk any worse, shall we say?
No, they didn't. No,
probably made it slightly easier going forward. And so that change doesn't mean it's more of an omission. I think I wouldn't like to charge Chris with the task of putting something together on fiduciary duty at this point in time. There are other priorities, and it'll be a very difficult one to. So I think it's one perhaps we put on a watch list.
yeah,
and see what develops from other funds and pools going forward.
I mean, I think that's a reasonable approach as an officer, but obviously I'm happy to be led by board or committee on that one.
I think we should note what David said and say we'll keep an eye on this going forward. I think.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so on the context of that, if the board are happy with the contents of the risk register, I'm not going to present any changes to committee at the next meeting. I'll just reference the fact that we've discussed it and we think it's still appropriate and relevant. However, there are a couple of items we'll keep an eye on.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Great, thank you, Chris. Yeah. So the next is compliments and complaints policy, which I was glad to see the compliments in there. It's a nice touch not to just have a complaints policy. And we're asked to comment on and approve the draft policy submitted, and yeah, that's on pages to follow. Do you want to go through it, Chris, or?
Again, I hadn't intended to go through it. I'm just conscious that I think the timing is quite fortunate, actually, because maybe some of the board members were new since this was first published and agreed by committee, so you might not have seen it before. But it's in line with the policies that lots of other funds have around compliments and complaints. We compliments log, which thankfully is actually longer than the complaints log, which is nice to note. But it's essentially trying to be a catch-all policy for helping anybody who wishes to make a compliment or a complaint, primarily focus on complaints, because within the LGPS regulations there's a two-stage process when it comes to lodging a complaint. It's called the Internal Disputes Resolution Procedure. So this document is framed in that context to try and help scheme members who might have a grievance against the fund or a decision taken by the fund, takes them through the process of what they need to do to be able to proceed with that complaint. So it's just setting out what we need from a scheme member when making the complaint, and how we'll deal with it. Take them through a little bit of detail about how the process will work, and the criteria you need to have or to be able to make that complaint. So 5.2 sets out you can make the complaint under the IDRP if you are one of those scheme members there. Explains a little bit how the stage 1 and stage 2 process works within the LGPS regulations. You've got to write to the adjudicator in the first instance. They'll review, they're independent from the officers involved in the bit of work that might have caused the complaint to arise. They'll review everything, make a determination. If you're still not happy with that stage 1 determination, you do have another bite at the cherry to another independent adjudicator. And they're usually senior officers within the council who've had no involvement with the case at that point, to try and give an independent opinion on it. Then it goes on to say, if you're still not happy, you have got other avenues to go down should you need to, and the ombudsman is ultimately where complaints may end up. So it just takes scheme members through how to approach and speak to the ombudsman should you wish to, and just provides a couple of other sources of assistance for scheme members as well. So it's an overall catch-all policy to try and support scheme members through the process, and hopefully it's serves its purpose. It's been, as I say, it's been published for I think 3 years now. This is the first formal review. Still very happy with the content of it. I think it's still appropriate. I have referenced it against other funds' complaints policies and compliments policies whilst reviewing this. Still in line with what's out there. And in terms of the changes, very, very little, a little bit of formatting and a couple of grammatical changes. So from my perspective, it's still appropriate and relevant, but obviously it's over to board now for any comment, because you might have some different avenues and thoughts on what the content is. And it's useful for me to have people who are not in this every day, different sets of eyes reviewing it as well. So happy to open up to comment and any suggestions that board might have, Chair. But that's the context behind the framing of this document. Use this document.
Thanks, Chris. Debbie has raised her hands. Debbie?
Thank you. There was just a couple of things I wanted to ask Chris about the policy. Have the minor changes that you've made since it was implemented in February, it would be really good, I think the same with the draft breaches policy, if you could maybe highlight those minor changes that you've made so that we can consider what you've added from the original version. And the same applied, sorry, to item 11 on the agenda, just because it'd be really helpful if we could see any minor changes you've made to approve those, if that works.
That's fine. I can circulate that after the meeting, Debbie. I didn't include the track changes version because there was literally taking a comma out here. Yeah, that was the only reason, but I can certainly share that. It's no problem.
I just thought for the purpose of the meeting as well, and going forward, it might show any changes we've made. If they were more than minor, it might just be really helpful so we can see those reviews and changes that have been made.
Yep.
I know from my perspective dealing with complaints generally, that when I think it was 3.3, where it says we may need to meet with you to discuss it. For example, if the complaint isn't clear enough. We have quite a lot of issues where we have complaints that are not very clear and we can't progress it to the next stage, and therefore that leads to delay. The 20 days goes out the window. But sometimes, and I know in our corporate policy, we have something that says we won't progress your complaint until your complaint has been clarified so that we can progress.
Yeah,
I don't know whether
okay.
you want to include something like that, just so that it's, I mean, I appreciate you may not get the extent of complaints that, that others do, but it just helps clarify if there is any, issues around the extent of that complaint.
Yep,
We're
that's
clear that any delay is built in from not your perspective, but from the perspective of not being able to clarify that complaint, just assist somewhat if you can't progress.
that's a fair comment, Debbie. Yeah, so I'll revisit. I'll have a look at the council's policy and see if there's anything I can take from that. This policy is framed under the LGPS regulations.
Yeah.
But if there's something in there that we can't actually act on it until we've got all the information, it covers us, doesn't it? So that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it is different from that perspective, which is why I'm only suggesting minor things that may just help in terms of the progress. There was one final comment, which was I think 6.1, and it may be it. So where it says, if you are not satisfied with the outcome of your complaint and haven't taken it through the 2-stage IDRP process, you are also talking about the complaint they've made to the pension department in the first instance. So you have the initial complaint, then you have the 2 stages. So what you're saying is once you've exhausted those 3 elements, then you can go to the ombudsman.
No, it's not. It's slightly different under the LGPS regs, Debbie. So I've tried to capture that in point 8. So if it's a complaint against the council, because quite often we get involved in complaints against the council, and that would follow the council's complaints procedure. So so we wouldn't. So if somebody complained against the decision taken by the fund, it'd go straight to stage 1.
That is the first stage. Is the stage 1. You don't deal with it first, and then it's DPR.
No, we'd exactly. We'd speak to the scheme member to try and understand what's going on. Sometimes it turns out that actually it's something that's easily resolved, doesn't result in a complaint. So I guess that's where you're coming from. The initial conversation, we can sometimes nip them in the bud, and it doesn't actually progress to a stage 1 IDRP. Yeah.
That's what I didn't understand. So it's either you've dealt with it, or it goes to stage 1 or stage 2, and then it's ombudsman.
Yes.
That's fine. Okay.
And the ombudsman quite often won't actually. We have seen in the past where scheme members have tried to bypass the IDRP process, they've gone straight to the ombudsman. He will send them away saying, no, you've got to go through the internal dispute resolution procedure before you can even speak to us. Yeah.
Sorry, Chris, that was where my comment arose in terms of you have to exhaust those elements before you can proceed to the pensions ombudsman. I just wanted to make that really clear as well.
Fair point.
Some people try and jump straight from one to the other, and you have to then bring them back. And with the Ombudsman for Wales, they refer to that in terms of their statistics as a premature complaint.
Right.
So it looks like your process isn't clear because they didn't realise, so they jumped that stage. So I think it was just me trying to clarify that they have to exhaust that before they can then go to the Ombudsman.
And I think that's a fair comment, and probably something we could include actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So maybe I'll reconsider section 7, section 6 about the ombudsman then, and whether I can just say, look, you need to go through the internal process before the ombudsman will even listen to you. Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Debbie. Useful to get the Powys perspective from an expert in this, and
I don't know about
that. And what Chris said about this coming from an LGPS model might mean what I had an issue that in reading this, and I looked at the IDRP on the website as well, that it's not clear to me, it's a bit vague who the adjudicator is, if that may be because it's a standard document and it's up to individual funds or authorities to specify who their adjudicator is in this process. And I don't know if I'm trying to remember who does this in other authorities I've been involved with, and I seem to think that there was well, first this talks about it may be an employer thing, but I think if it's an employer complaint, it automatically defaults to the employer's regime rather than being part of this in stage 1. And then where I've seen it before, stage 1 has been, well, if it can't be resolved with the pension service, then it goes to the committee, and stage 2 has been specifically, it'll be considered by the monitoring officer before it goes to the ombudsman.
Mhm.
And specified exactly that routine, you know. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've considered that and decided to keep it vague, or
Yeah. Ultimately, if I give it, the main complaint that the LGPS sees is in respect of ill health retirements. So scheme members get determination from their employer in respect of ill health benefits, and they're not happy with that. So the reason we've used the phrase or the term adjudicator is because it's what the regulations say, but it just gives a little bit of flexibility in saying to the employer who makes that initial decision at stage 1 of the ill health retirement to say, you had a certain person within the organization, perhaps an HR advisor, make that determination, give it to somebody independent who has experience in this process and ask them to make the determination this time. So have another go at it, but be a different HR person. And in that case, stage 2 would then come to the pension fund to make the determination. And if we felt we couldn't, I think this is from memory, but I think in the governance compliance statement, the only time the committee would get involved would be in respect of any death grant payment where there's some discrepancy. Usually it's resolved at stage 2 by the pension fund. And that would be a senior officer within the pension fund. So yes, we have considered it. You might think it's being deliberately vague, but it's given us the opportunity to actually appoint an adjudicator for each case. And it might be different, I guess is the point.
yeah, okay, gives you flexibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have had challenge previously to say we've appointed an adjudicator for stage 1, and the person's come back and said, I'm not happy with that because I spoke to them as part of the process. We're then able to nominate a different adjudicator. So it gives us that little bit of flexibility within the process rather than being hard fixed to say stage 1 is this person, stage 2 is that person. That's why we phrased it like this.
Okay.
That's a fair comment.
Yeah, if it's deliberate, then happy to accept that way forward.
Yes, thank you. So perhaps what I can do then is take on board Debbie's comments about the track changes and some amendments to maybe 3.3 and 6.1. Perhaps I can just do a revised version and circulate it with the board before I take it onto committee for approval. Would that be okay?
Yeah, circulate it offline just for further comments. Yeah. Yeah, no need to wait for the next meeting, is there really?
No, I'd like to try and get this one approved
Yeah.
and published at the next committee meeting if possible. Yeah.
Sound to me. Everyone happy to move forward with that?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Hoping that Carrie Ann has made a note of that. Okay. Next is it breaches policy? Is it you again, Chris?
It's me again, yes. This one, I think if I was to present a track changes one on this one, there'd be no red on it at all. I don't think it's changed at all from the previous versions. So just taking on board Debbie's comment. I will just double check that's the case though. So this is the breaches policy, and this is something that we have to have in place as expected by the regulator under their their general code of practice. So this one has been reviewed and it hasn't changed at all, I don't think. Literally just updated in respect of dates and whatnot. But this is the process to help anybody involved with the scheme, whether that be a scheme member or a member of the board or anybody involved in administrating the scheme, how they go through the process of reporting any breaches or recording any breaches and ultimately reporting them to the pensions regulator. So it's a bit more comprehensive, this document, but it's meant to be a procedural document as well to help people determine whether a breach is recordable and reportable and whatnot. And if you've had the chance to read it, then you'll see the traffic light system and the color coordinated section later on. So it's trying to identify what a breach is, to try and help people understand what they might want to consider when it comes to reporting or recording. Some bullet points in 1.3. 1.4 is capturing who this policy relates to. I talked about members of the pension board and officers, management of the fund, etc. And it's talking about the requirements under the Pensions Act that we have to have as people involved with administering the scheme, and what we think there's reasonable cause, a duty, and how we report any breaches and whatnot. So that's the legal part captured in 2.3. 2.5 is identifying that it's within the regulator's general code of practice, that we need to have a breaches policy in place. 2.6 goes on then to determine or set out why we produce this document and how you as the Powers Pension Board will help us when it comes to recording and reporting any breaches ultimately to the regulator if they're serious enough. These are the various acts that are need to give consideration to when it comes to breaches. I don't expect everybody to be experts in these. In fact, I'll have to revisit a lot of them as well to make sure that they're appropriate. But they're linked so that anybody who's following this, we can easily access the appropriate legislation when it comes to considering breaches. The regulator uses a term called material significance. So where a breach is considered to be of material significance, that's the ones that they want us to report. There's not a requirement to report every breach of legislation to the regulator. For example, on our breaches register, we've identified that we breach when we don't pay a refund within 5 years. So the legislation currently says, although I think this is changing, that we have to, as a pension scheme, pay a refund to somebody who's left the scheme within 5 years of their date of leaving. It's not always possible because we've lost contact with them. So if we're unable to trace somebody and pay that refund within 5 years, automatically breach the legislation. The regulator knows this and deem it appropriate that we just record it. They don't want us to report every time we are unable to make this payment because we simply can't, because we can't find the person. That's an example of where a breach is recordable and not reportable. However, if there was a breach in respect of the annual benefit statements, that's quite a common one within the LGPS, where we send out a batch of statements knowing they're incorrect. So just for the sake of satisfying legislation, we've just populated an annual benefit statement and sent it out, knowing it's wrong. That would be determined by the regulator as being a material breach because you've provided incorrect information to your scheme member knowingly. That would be determined as a reportable breach. So that's why they use this material significance. That would be a material one. The horrific refund one would not be a material one. Just trying to set out that context there. This is a flowchart to try and help somebody determine whether they think it's what type of breach it is. Try and help this typical flow diagram, try and help people through the decision-making process. And that some of these things can be very complicated. And in that case, you might want to have a chat with me because I'm closer to regulations in determining whether it should be recordable, reportable, etc. So have a chat through with me to determine what we need to do into the next steps. Timescales, very serious breaches, recording breaches are covered within the following bullet points. 3.10, 3.10 is takes people through how to make the report the breach. The regulator is keen to use online tools for reporting breaches. And it gives some timescales. You've got to do it within 10 days of identifying the breach, essentially. Some of the detail that you need to just complete the breach, that would be on the web form anyway. So that's it's just giving some people, trying to help people say, look, if you're going to make a report of breach, this is what you need to have to hand to be able to do it. Confidentiality, failures to report the breach, and it can be quite serious. So obviously we have to take this very, very seriously when it comes to recording and reporting breaches, and that's identified in 3.11. So if the board, a member of the board, for example, think they identified a breach, it would be in your duty to report it accordingly within the timescales identified. And this is just what the regulator can do when it comes to not following the appropriate rules. 4 covers about how we deal with it internally, and that's reporting it to the pension fund committee. And the breaches report that you see every quarter also goes to the pension fund committee. And any new breaches that we identify would go into the register. We'd have a discussion at board level to determine whether it's recordable or reportable. That would also filter up to the committee at the appropriate meeting as well to let them know what's happening. And then obviously contacts myself and the pension administration manager in terms of any questions on it. Appendix A is a supporting document. to try and help people understand what the breaches are, how to consider them in the context of reporting them or recording them, and some examples of potential good governance and exercise that we should carry out. So money's paid across the scheme at the right time. So employers submitting their payments at the right time. We'll come on to that particular item later on. Some understanding of trying to make it as easy as possible for anybody who might want to consider recording or reporting a breach, what they need to think. And then the traffic light system is then here. Breaches in the red category must always be reported. Amber needs to have a discussion, and green probably just recording and not reporting to the regulator. So trying to make it as simple as possible using a traffic light system, which is then captured in Appendix B. So I've counted through that. I realise there's an awful lot in it. It's relating to legal and lawful requirements and whatnot. So I'm happy to take any questions and comments on it. Obviously, Debbie, with your background, this might be something that you might have had some chance to consider or not. So I'll be interested in any comments that you might have. But in terms of something, it's something we must have as expected by the regulator. And hopefully it's comprehensive enough to help those reading it and following it know what their expectations are, their responsibilities are, and the process they need to go to or through when it comes to recording or reporting breaches. So it was a quick canter through. Apologies for that, but I'm happy to take any comments or have a discussion on the document now, Joe.
I can't see any hands up, and just on your paragraph 1.4 lists members of this board as the first group of people where this document applies, and then goes on to officers involved in management, which includes yourself, Chris, of course. While I think this is a very clear document, and you did say that there's little change to it from a previous version, which I'm happy to support the documents, but in practice, what would happen that would be that we would discuss any breach as it's sort of becoming more apparent. And am I right to say that anything would come to the board before it's reported to the regulator?
Yes. Yeah. So, and I think if I try and bring this one to life a little bit, if we had, there's a requirement from under the regulations for employers to submit contribution payments across the fund within a certain time scale. If somebody misses it by a day or two because of timings or whatever, then we might record that on the breaches register. In fact, we do log it as a general late payment of contributions item on the breaches register. If it kept on happening, there'd be a conversation that we'd have to have at board to say, hang on, this employer keeps breaking the legislation because they keep sending it late. At what point do we make that reportable item? Have they done it frequently enough now and at enough of a scale for us to think, actually, they keep doing it, they're not learning from the lessons, we need to report it? We'd have the conversation here. It would then be taken up to the committee, and we'd consider whether it was reportable to the regulator or not. But we'd certainly have the conversation around it here, which is one of the reasons for producing the employee performance document, for example, which we'll cover later on.
I think it somewhere in part 2 or 3 it does say that breaches would be a standing item on the board agenda.
Yeah.
Part 4 specifically talks about reporting a breach to the fund committee.
Yeah.
So would you in practice expect to have gone to the board before it goes to the committee? And
yeah,
would it be reported to the regulator before the committee receives it as for information, or
I guess it would depend on timings, wouldn't it? If something was really serious, then I wouldn't wait for a committee or board meeting. I'd try and get everyone together beforehand to say, look, this has come up, I think it's reportable, and we'd have the conversation, certainly with the chairs of board and committee initially, and then it would probably be taken to the following meeting saying, by the way, this has happened and it was reported. It'd be done in that context.
Yeah, the usual recourse to chairs if it's an urgent matter. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Okay. I'm seeing no hands up, so presume that on this occasion Debbie's happy and document probably is on a quite standard format, is it, Chris? It's
It is, yeah. When I look at our policies, I do often compare them to neighbouring funds or funds in Wales to see what they've got in place. And whilst the wording is not exactly the same, or the formatting is not exactly the same, the content is consistent with the LGPS. So I can't remember whether we all produced this from a template, because obviously it's quite a comprehensive policy. Whether there was a template produced when it was first introduced and we've all adopted that, I don't know. But yeah, it's consistent. Yeah.
yeah. Thanks. Well, thanks for all the work on this, and we'll support the document for approval by the committee. Is that the?
Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
So the next item is the WPP update, and just a note on this, we've got some items in the confidential part of the meeting today, which includes this matter again, WPP update. But I think Chris and I decided it needed to be in both parts of the agenda just to highlight some of the good news that we've had recently. And do you want to go into that first, Chris?
Yep, certainly will. Thank you, Chair. So again, board will have seen this document before. This is the covering report to the quarterly documentation that the Wales Pension Partnership produces that goes around all of Wales. So we're all presenting the same information at a similar sort of time. So I'm not going to go into that into too much detail because it's not my documents. It is produced by the Wales Pension Partnership. But what I did want to focus on really was items 2.3 or paragraphs 2.3 and 2.4. Again, I think the hyperlink is not working in this document either, Chair, actually. But at the meeting in March of the Joint Governance Committee of the Wales Pension Partnership, one of the items was a proposal from the WPP, which would go to government on the next development, the next stage of the Wales Pension Partnership. So we talked about the LGPS Fit for the Future consultation that the government launched. Off the back of that, a lot of work's taken place and many discussions. But it was an opportunity to take the WPP on to the next level in terms of producing a financially regulated entity within Wales that looks after the LGPS investments. So that opportunity doesn't come around very often. So a business case was built to support why keeping a Wales pool and aligning it with the government's vision for the future was a sensible thing to do for Wales, retaining ownership of local investments, looking after money that's paid in by scheme members in Wales, employers in Wales, stays in Wales for us to be able to use. The risk of not doing that would have meant merging with another pool over the border and perhaps dilution of some of our local investment opportunities, dilution of our voice when it comes to pooling. So the case was made, a pretty comprehensive, compelling business case, I think, to government at the meeting, at the end of February, and was subsequently approved at the meeting of the 12th of March. If I get the hyperlinks working in the document, you'll be able to go and read the business case, but essentially to say that the Joint Governance Committee supported the proposal to develop a Wales Pension Partnership version 2, which met the government's criteria and expectations under the consultation. So they supported that, which I just wanted to make the board aware of. It was unanimous, and it went across in the timescales that was expected. As a follow-on from that, the Minister for Pensions, Torsten Bell, actually attended a site in South Wales, Uskmouth, which is a repurposed coal mine, which is now being used for battery storage purposes. And the reason he did that was because there's been some investments made by the Wales Pension Partnership into this infrastructure investment in South Wales as a way of demonstrating that if we're able to invest in Wales, these are differences we could make in terms of job creation, repurposing an expired site, reopening a railway line which gets into this site and whatnot. So it was quite positive and quite pleasing that the Minister for Pensions actually took the time to come and have a look at an investment that we've made within Wales as an example of some of the benefits that we can have by retaining ownership of a Wales investment vehicle. So following that visit, the government did release a press release, which I'm aware I did link in the document, but I think the link is not working, so I will share that. In fact, I think I might have shared it with board and committee when that happened, but we need to just resolve the links in this document. So those are two things I really wanted to pull out of the recent Wales Pension Partnership updates. Progress has been good. Dialogue with the government has been very positive in Wales Pension Partnership version 2, the the investment management company. And we've had some visits from the government at some of the sites that we've actually been able to develop in Wales off the back of some investments being made locally. So that was all I was going to pull out of this document, Chair, but obviously I'm happy to hand over to you because I know you've had some discussions and some involvement in the WPP as well.
Yes, I've attended a couple of sessions where WPP have had a liaison with the board chairs, and going forward, as Chris says, there's been a lot of work by officers on what they called Project Snowdon to put the bid together. I know Chris has led on one aspect of that. There's been several work streams, and officers from different partner authorities have led on different aspects, and I can only thank them for all the work that's burning the midnight oil on this, in addition to authority duties. And yeah, it's really good to read that the ministers have reviewed the proposal and they're supportive of WPP proceeding as set out in the bid, and it's not the end of the line, but it's clear that the idea of the Wales pool continuing has found favour from national politicians both in Wales and Westminster, and we'll have to take this forward. There'll be further meetings of the Joint Governance Committee in June, 4th of June, and that the plan will then go to pensions committees later in June, and we'll go to full council meetings in the 8 constituent authorities in July, and there's an FCA submission in September if that approval is granted by all 8. So it's still a lot of work to be done on this, and I think where we've all, particularly in Powys, being one of the smaller funds, we've been quite fortunate to have an equal voice in the Welsh Matters, 8 funds, each with 1 vote for the pension board chairs, and that will change going forward in terms of the company governance. There'll be a board for the company which won't be the 8 authorities. It'll be more of a business regimented board for the company, but there's proposed to be a liaison committee which will set the agenda for the WPP proposed company, and that is planned to reflect the existing JGC with the 8 members, 1 from each of the authorities, and scheme member representation. So that's is all good news going forward, but lots of work as well yet to be done and taken forward. And perhaps we can discuss some of the nitty-gritty during the second part of the agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah.
Taking silence as approval again. It's we can, as I said, discuss it in the second part, and it's really as a board we're receiving this for information. So if you can note this report from now. Are we all happy to move on? Yeah, David's nodding there, you can see. So we'll get back to that. Standing items, and I think those are there. Item 13 on the agenda as a matter of. Oh, sorry, Chris. Did you want to say anything else on WPP? Are we done?
Yeah, we're done, Chair. Just one thing, just to wrap it up. To pick up on the comment you've made about us being the smallest fund in Wales. Pooling for us has been a game changer in terms of what we've been able to do. We've made significant savings when it comes to fees, because in the investment landscape, savings come with scale. So the fact that we've been able to join up with our partner funds in Wales to access these investments has brought the fees down for us. So we've made some quite significant savings in terms of the investment side of things. Plus the networking and the collaboration that we've experienced across Wales has really benefited us as a smaller fund, having access to these other officers and committee members around Wales has really been a huge benefit to us. So yeah, we're going to continue to try and push for that to continue in the WPP version 2.
Absolutely, and allowed us to do some of the impact investments I've invested in Wales. That battery storage you referred to, I think that's in the infrastructure sub fund which we're invested in. So we got that, and the forestry we've referred to earlier, which is not just in Wales but in Powys. So
no, absolutely. And David will remember this when he was Section 151 officer. We've had aspirations to invest into infrastructure for a long time, a 10% aspiration to do that. I don't think it's any coincidence that as soon as the WPP made those funds available for us, we were straight in to make those investments, simply because the scale made it affordable and viable for us. So we're very pleased. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I think it's true of other funds in Wales as well. It's not just Powys, but particularly pertinent for us being smaller. But yeah, I think the diversification into things like infrastructure, private debt, etc., the opportunities just weren't there previously, and particularly those niche local and impact investments. So
yeah, correct. Yeah,
all good news,
yeah,
but lots of work to do.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I wandered into standing items, and basically there's nothing to add, is there, Chris?
No updates in this, Chair. No.
And future board meetings, we've had those in the calendar for a while. The 18th of July one is face-to-face, I believe. So I'll make the journey down to Llandrindod. Hopefully I'll meet one or two of you in the chamber down there. So then we go to item 15 is we have the resolution to go into confidential agenda, and exclusion of press and public. So can I ask if you're all in favour of moving that?
Chair, could I have a proposer and a seconder? Sorry to butt in.
Yeah, I'll propose, Chair.
Thank you, Debbie.
I'll second.
Thanks,
Debbie.
David. Yeah.
Yeah.
All in favour? Yeah. Okay, carry on.